Well, welcome everyone to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. I am thrilled that you are here today. You are in for a treat. We're going to talk about creating super fans with the person who literally wrote the book on it. Brittany Hodak is here. Welcome, Brittany.
Thank you, Jane. I'm so excited to be here. I
Oh
don't know
my
if
God.
you know this or not, but years ago, Jane, the way you and I first connected was because I was a very loyal listener to this podcast. So I
Oh
listened
my
to
God.
the podcast and I got your books, then we connected and you became my coach. So this feels very full circle to me.
Well, I have to tell you that it's one of the greatest things that I think goes on in my world is when I have these full circle moments. And I absolutely love showcasing my clients. And you, every time we get on the phone, I'd be like, damn, she's good. Oh my God. She from like really, you are just such a superstar in this field. And so tell everybody, like normally you're helping large companies create super fans. Today we're going to talk about how to do it as a speaker. But tell everybody like about your current business model. You're on the road speaking constantly right now, and I'm loving watching it.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. So I talk about customer experience, but because my background is in entertainment, I worked for record labels, I worked for advertising agencies, I worked alongside some of the biggest artists on the planet. So the way I talk about customer experience is this idea of creating super fans. But really, a super fan is just a customer who creates more customers. It's someone who loves what you do so much that they come back and they tell their friends. And like so many of our peers in the speaking industry, I became a keynote speaker totally by accident. Like I had no idea this was a career path. I was running my own agency. I was doing all of these fun, interesting things. And I was getting approached on a pretty regular basis to speak, but I always just did it as a biz dev thing for my agency. So I spoke at a lot of conferences for magazines. Like I remember one year I spoke at events for Inc., Forbes, Entrepreneur, Billboard, Adweek. It was like constantly I was at these events. And then people started asking me what my fee was. And the first couple times people asked, I was like, wait, are they asking me to pay to speak? And so I Googled it and I was like, wait, people get paid to do this? That sounds awesome. And so I sort of accidentally fell into this industry, which is how I think I first discovered you and the podcast. And so now over the past 5 years, I've gotten very intentional about how I want my brand as a keynote speaker to be different from others, the things that I want to do that are important. And, I am very much a practice what you preach type gal. So the same way that I'm out there talking to my clients about customer experience, I want the experience of working with me to be amazing for all of my clients. So I'm excited to talk to other speakers today to talk about some of the fun things that I do before, during, and after the keynote to make it a really amazing experience. Because as anybody who is a speaker knows, if you can make that meeting planner look like a star, if you can make that head of marketing look like a star, you are in great shape and they will absolutely invite you back and tell their friends at other companies to hire you too.
And you used my favorite word. I recognized at the end of the year that my word last year was intentional. And you just used it, and you've actually got a new product that involves it. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Okay, so your business model right now. Talk a little bit about your book because it's coming out. What is the subtitle of the book, and when is it coming out?
So the book is out January 10th. It's called Creating Superfans: How to Turn Your Customers into Lifelong Advocates. And it's beautiful. I'm going to hold it up for everybody that's watching on YouTube. It is a hardcover book that I chose to print in color. So it's really fun because it's all about customer experience. I wanted the experience of reading it to be great. So it's very kind of rock and roll. All of the chapter titles are song titles. At the end of every chapter, I have what I call my super quick rewind that recaps the chapter. And there are a lot of fun images throughout that are, they pull inspiration from like the old Hatch Show print posters, and there's like concert ticket imagery and foam fingers, and just it's a really, really fun read. But it's called How to Turn Your Customers into Lifelong Advocates, and it's out January 10th.
There's even a Spotify, that's 2023, by the way. There's even a Spotify playlist that you have curated to go with this book. I mean, it's so much fun. Uh, don't walk, run and get this book, because even though it's designed to help big companies, but actually there's so many things in there that the everyday person can actually start. It creates a lot of thought about how am I creating, fans who are raving about me. And this is a huge thing in our industry. How often, Brittany, is word of mouth the reason why you're doing so well right now? Like, talk about, I asked you the other day, well, where'd you get all this business? Because I knew you were busy and there was COVID and you had a child, all of these things. I said, how did you get all of this business? And you said it was all spin. So talk a little bit about how the word of mouth is working for you.
Yeah, well, again, I think anyone in this industry knows that the number one thing you need to do to grow your business is to have a great speech. And if you have a great speech and you deliver it well, you're going to be successful. And word of mouth is the most important factor for any business, large or small, because one of the things I talk about in this book is your brand isn't what you say it is. And that's true of speakers just as well as it's true of like the Fortune 50, right? Your brand is what other people say about you. Your brand is what those people in the audience go tell their wives and husbands when they get home and somebody says, how was your event? Like, that is your brand. So in this book, I talk about that.
So that gives me an idea. This is your first piece of homework. When somebody says, oh, so-and-so told me all about you, ask them what they said, because you don't actually, so, if you referred another speaker to me and we got on a Zoom call, I need to say, well, what did Brittany say? And that is me starting to put together what my brand really is. Like you said, it's not what you intend it to be. It's really more what people are perceiving. And I think that's such an important first step here, don't you think?
Oh, it's a very important first step. And I would say if you don't have customers yet, or you don't have the kind of customers you want yet, you can even take it a step further and say, well, what do you want people to say about you? Because if you don't know what you want people to say about you, you're never going to have intentionality with your brand. You're never going to be able to create an intentional experience. And the thing about customer experience is it's not a matter of like, will there be one or won't there? It's, is it intentional or is it accidental? Do you know what your uniqueness is? Do you know what that magical thing is that you have to offer? So think about, what would you want someone to say about you? What are those 3 to 5 adjectives that you want people to say? And then you can ask yourself how you're showing up in that way at every step of the process, so that that is their experience. There's alignment between what you want your brand to be and what you're projecting.
I like that. And take that straight to your web design conversation, because that will be kind of the beginning of the brand experience for people who are finding out about you. So they hear something about you on the street, they go, then their next stop is going to be to your website. Let's see if this person is legit, if they look like what, and that needs to match up. So when I think about your brand and all of the things I've seen come out of your office, it's always colorful and beautifully designed, and it's got energy to it. Are those things that you're trying to convey with your brand?
They are. Yes. Thank you. All of those are very much in alignment. Energy, fun, excitement, humor. I love when people say, you're so funny. Like, are you a stand-up comedian? Because you should be a stand-up comedian. But actually, this is a side note, and I shouldn't give this tip away because I feel like it's like a really smart idea. But as a bonus for speakers listening, I had this idea to audition for America's Got Talent, like as a comedian. Like, I don't really want to be a comedian because just like it sounds awful, right? It sounds like an awful gig, like doing late night shows at open bars and smoky clubs. But I feel like I could pretend to be a comedian for like 5 minutes at a time to be really successful on America's Got Talent, and then raise my fee because it can be like as seen on America's Got Talent. So that's like my fun idea, is to like be a pretend stand-up comedian. So if anybody out there is listening and wants to execute on that before me, feel free, because there's like a lot of other things on my list. But the fact that people say to me like, oh, you're so funny, is something that I was like, oh, I need to lean into this. I need to like tell more jokes on stage. I need to not be afraid to like make these spontaneous jokes, because I feel like I do a lot of like impromptu stuff with the audience, or calling back to something the CEO said or something another speaker said. So that's something that like I got that feedback over and over again. And I was like, oh, this is something that is like refreshing to people, and they're using it as a differentiator of like, oh, you're the funniest speaker we've ever booked. So that to me was a cue of like, okay, great. Like this is something I should spend time on.
Well, yeah. And I would say the term jokes, rather than that, use the term humor. Let me just mine my humor that's already there. And a lot of times you can watch the game tape and say, oh yeah, that got a laugh. Oh yeah, that got a laugh. And then you can be more intentional about that. And I think that that's just fantastic, that that's a part of, it's you're creating this brand, and humor is a part of that. And I think like you said, your book titles are all song, or your chapter titles are all songs. And I think that's just reflective and just how much fun it is. Okay, so you get a phone call and they book you to come and speak. What are some of the pieces that you're adding to your mix in order to make this amazing CX with your clients?
So I do videos in my proposals. I use a software called Better Proposals. I've been playing around with a couple of others because I don't love everything about Better Proposals. Specifically, it's not a great mobile user experience for my customers. And when you download a PDF, it looks awful. But I also don't love part of the user experience of Proposify. So we'll see which one I stay with. But every client gets a video proposal, even when it's somebody who's incredibly well qualified that wants to book me already. The reason they do that is because I know those proposals get shared a lot internally. So it's not always, even if you're talking to the decision maker, they may want to say to their CEO or somebody on the board, hey, look who's coming in. So I always do a video proposal. And because I'm sending it through one of those proposal software companies, I know how many times it's shared. So I'm looking at that. When somebody signs that proposal, that triggers the next piece of communication from us, which is the invoice. And again, our invoice is fun. It's not boring, right? And we have a fun email where we're sending the things like, we know that they're going to need our W-9. We know that they're going to need the invoice, but we also know that it doesn't have to look like every other invoice in the world. It doesn't have to be boring. So they get that. I then get on my like first pre-event call. I have two pre-event calls. The first one is to talk about what I can do to be helpful to the client over the next few months as they're getting ready to launch the event. So I usually create one or more videos for them to use. Sometimes that's totally internally with their team. Like if it's a sales meeting for that team, that may just go into an email or into a private social group. Maybe they're putting it on their Slack channel. Other times, if it's a conference event, it might be, we want you to record these 3 videos that we're going to be sharing on our socials over the next 3 months. So one is announcing that you're here, and another one is saying, hey guys, here's a discount code. And the last might be saying, hey, don't forget today's the final day to register, or whatever it is. So asking how I can be valuable to the event organizers as they're getting ready to do the event. And sometimes that's speaker stuff. And sometimes it's them saying, hey, what's like a cool activation you've seen? Or you go to a lot of events, like what are your favorite things that people have done for cocktail parties? Or do you know a great band who can come play to our 1,200 people in Phoenix? So just making myself available as a partner to the event organizer.
So call number 1 is, how can I be of value to you? How can I be a great partner to you? Love the video proposal idea. Love the how can I be of value call. What else?
So on that call, we talk about whether or not I'm going to do a pre-event survey to the audience. Sometimes I do,
Okay.
sometimes I don't. It really just depends on who the audience is.
Mhm.
And then we talk about what that next touch will be. So I always offer to do videos. Almost every client wants the videos. I also always offer to drip content before the event. So if somebody wants to do a free ebook, if they want to do like a PDF, if they want to do a video series, I have so much content. And I think probably every speaker listening to this has more content than they realize. Like we create things all the time. So thinking about the things that you have that you can easily package to give to someone, because I'm promoting my book now, and now it's usually like, do you want to give the first couple of chapters of the book to someone? After the book is out, it will be maybe something different, but I like to offer content to my clients to give to their audience before and after the event, A, because then I can capture those email addresses with their permission, and B, because it helps get people in the frame of mind. It's like when they're in that audience, I don't have to start by talking about how important customer experience is. I don't have to introduce this idea of creating superfans. I get to say, you know what? You all know how important superfans are. You've been hearing me talk for the past few months about what your ROI looks like when you create customers who create more customers, or what your retention looks like. So it kind of helps accelerate that time that we have together when I'm on stage.
Not starting at the foundations. Okay. You touched on this just a little bit about your book. You shared with me the other day, and at the time of this recording, that you had already pre-sold thousands and thousands of copies of your book. Talk about how you did that, because I know all of the authors out there will be very keen to know. You're
Yes.
spilling
So
all.
I worked with an amazing partner called Page Two, that's a hybrid publisher. And this sounds like so snobby, but I have to admit here that for a long time, I had like a really negative opinion of hybrid publishing because I didn't really understand it. And when friends or colleagues would say like, oh yeah, like I worked with a hybrid publisher, in my mind, I was like, you paid someone for a publishing deal. Like you're supposed to get paid to do that, because I didn't understand. And because there are so many like predatory, like scummy people and companies out there calling themselves hybrid publishers that like really aren't. So when I, about, gosh, probably 3 years ago, was working on the beginning stages of this book and writing the book proposal, I looked at a few different paths, right? The one was like straight up self-publish, one was traditional publishing, and this third was, do I find like a high-end hybrid? And for me, I've had a lot of success as a speaker. I've done a lot of fun, interesting things. I have some accolades that, sound impressive on paper, but I didn't have a huge audience with consumers. So from talking to a literary agent and one publisher who did put forth an offer, I realized that I didn't stand to gain a lot. Like the advance that I was offered was $15,000. And in my mind, I was like, well, that's $15,000 to give up the rights to this thing that I'm creating. And as somebody who comes from the music industry, I was sort of looking at it as like, these are my masters. Like, do I want to give up my masters, or do I want to work with someone who's doing the distribution for me and helping me with creative? So as I started investigating these hybrid publishers, I realized that it might be a really cool model. So I ended up working with this company called Page Two, and they've worked with several incredible speakers. And what I loved about this idea of working with them, number one, was that I own the book. This is my book. I got to make creative decisions like printing the book in color, like having it be designed.
No, you would have had a major wall because it costs more money to print a book in color.
Oh yeah.
With a traditional publisher, they would have been just like, No.
Oh yeah, no,
We're
it's
not.
like it cost almost $3 a unit more to do the book the way I did the book, because not only did I print it in color, but I have 4 different colors on the cover. There's like beautiful, colorful end sheets in throughout. It's not printed on that like ugly, like off-white paper that most books are printed on. It's like crisp, bright white paper. So I wanted to be intentional, again, to use your word, about all of these decisions. So I knew working with a hybrid was the way I needed to go, but I wanted my book to be available everywhere. And that's why I didn't really want to self-publish. So page 2, beyond being brilliant at the creative part, I had no idea what the editing process was like to write a book, because this is my first book. So I went through like 3 substantive edits, then 3 copy edits, then like 2 rounds of proofreading and fact checking and all of the things. So having their team was brilliant to guide me through all of that. But because they have distribution through Macmillan, my book is going to be in every Barnes and Noble store, in every Books a Million store, in all of the airport stores. And they've shipped literally thousands and thousands of copies out to all of these retailers. And because I had like, the one thing about when you're not straight self-publishing it yourself is it's a much longer time period. So I've been talking about this book now for a year, waiting for its street date, and I have pre-sold thousands of copies to my customers. So I have done a lot of cheerleading of this book, and sharing advanced copies of this book to hopefully lead to a launch that will land me on the Wall Street Journal list.
So every time you're sending out your agreement, you're shipping the book to say, come on, let's build this into the package, right? Because selling books one at a time, because you're on a podcast or something like that, versus selling thousands at a time or hundreds at a time is so much easier. So make sure that if you're listening to this and you have a book, make sure that you are working your book into every agreement. It really should be just like built in.
Yeah, well, and it's so funny. My friend Rachel Sheeran, who is a brilliant speaker, shared this tip with me. She was like, Britt, this is how you do it. You get on the call, you talk about your fee, you tell them what your fee is. And then when you've agreed on the fee, this is what you say. And what about books? And then you shut up. Like you literally just say those 4 words or 3 words or 4. Is it 4? It's 4, right? And what about, 4 words. And what about books? And you just stop talking.
I also love asking the question, well, how long would you like this message to last? It's like, okay, well, as long as humanly possible. And that's a great segue too into a book conversation. Love it, love it, love it. Okay, so we've talked about kind of the before and during. What are you doing to create super fans after you have finished, or is there anything kind of during the lead up or during the actual speech? What are you doing actually while you're on stage to pull people into your database?
Well, I love using Mentimeter. I've been using Mentimeter probably like 85 to 90% of my live events over the past year. And for anybody who doesn't use it, it's a really simple software. People scan a QR code on their phone and they can interact with your slides. And then those results are shown on the screens in real time. And it's a really great way to keep people engaged. And it's also a really great way to get them into your database. So that's one of my favorite ways. I also really like Talkadot. That's a software that I've been using for about a year now. And it's a really great way to deliver a leave behind. So it takes Talkadot is a service where somebody scans a QR code, they answer like 5 or 6 questions about you, all really easy, like how actionable were you? Do they want to see you again? Yes or no? But it asks them if they book speakers, or if they know someone who books speakers. And if it does, it captures a little bit more of their information. And then everybody gets whatever you want them to have, whether it's like, for me, for the past few months, it's been the first 2 chapters of my book because I wanted people to get to start reading the book, but you can give away anything you want. And then when you're done, you have this list of qualified leads of people who said they want to hear from you. And it opts people into your email list unless they opt out. So every time I do a live event now, I probably am capturing 75 to 80% of the audience into my email database versus 2 years ago, it was more like 30 to 35%. So I found that 1-2 punch of Mentimeter and offering something of value through Talkadot is a way to get just about everyone to sign up to hear more from you.
Great. And we'll put those both in the show notes. Mentimeter is Mentimeter. Is that correct?
Yes. ER, not RE. So Mentimeter.com. You said it right. Yeah, you said it the right way. But Mentimeter, and then Talkadot is talka.com.
Okay. Got it. Awesome. Okay. So after the speech is done, what is your call to action, say for the client to get more business, or how do you extend the experience for them?
So one thing that I've just started embracing that, to be honest, I didn't really do for years because I couldn't figure out what the value was to the client. And because I'm all about the customer experience, I didn't want to do something that I didn't see the value in. But now I'm doing post-event calls, which was something that I didn't do for the longest time. And the reason I didn't do them is because it felt a little gratuitous, right? I was like, oh, I'm just going to get on a call for them to tell me I did a great job. But the way I structure it now is, hey, let's debrief together. Let's talk about the feedback you got, and let's talk about what you need next, whether that's from me or whether that's you want another speaker next year. And, I happen to go to a lot of events and know a lot of great speakers. So now about 2 weeks after every event, I get on the phone with the client and we talk about what happens next.
Perfect. I love that. And for you, you used to evolve it into consulting, which you found quite cumbersome. Talk about that and what you're offering instead now.
So I have always loved to be on stage. And the thing that I sort of fell victim to, victim is the wrong word to use, but the thing I sort of said yes to that I perhaps didn't realize at the time wasn't my best yes early in my speaking career was I would speak and people would say, you have to consult for us. And I would say, okay. And then I would do these 3 or 6 or 12-month consulting engagements. And I didn't love them. And I didn't love them because I would get really frustrated at inefficiencies. I felt especially with large organizations, it was a lot about well, let's have a meeting about the meeting we're going to have, or let's have a call about that call we need to schedule. And I just felt 90% of things could have been emails. And then also it takes so long to roll things out. So I just wasn't my heart wasn't in it. I felt a lot of my energy was being spent on things that weren't me on stage talking to people. So
the scope of the work would often, because you weren't setting up really good, clear boundaries around yourself, you would start to bleed into areas that you really didn't want to be involved in the first place, right? And so
100%. It was so much scope creep, and I have not historically done a great job of honoring my own boundaries because, I want customers to have an amazing experience. And because I have a pretty varied background. So I've experienced a lot of things. And so oftentimes I would be oh, I know exactly what's wrong here. Let me just fix it for you. Rather than spend the 50 hours it'll take for me to teach you how to solve this problem that I can see coming from a mile away. Let me just do it and take 15 hours. And even though it's completely out of scope and in no way related to this thing that we're doing, I'll just do it. Because the thing with customer experience is pretty much everything is experience, and everyone in a company is in the experience department. So all of these things are very interconnected. It's like a ball of yarn, right? So I would find myself doing all of these things. So And, that's not to say consulting wasn't lucrative. It's not to say that it wasn't, something that my clients were thrilled with the outcomes of, because it just wasn't scalable. Because I have run agencies in the past. I know that at this point in my life, I don't want to grow a team. I don't want to have a team of people who are out there teaching my methodologies or consulting, using my framework, because I've got 2 young boys and I love to travel. So I've got one full-time employee who is just brilliant and amazing. And so it's really about my time and like, what are we committing for my time and her time? So now, instead of consulting, there are 2 things that I offer. So you can hire me to speak, or you can hire me for one of 2 packages, and that's it. And I'm getting really good at saying no when people, and especially it's hard when you have clients that have been your clients for like years and have hired you again and again for different things. And like, I literally just yesterday, a client who's become a good friend was like, well, can't we just, and I was like, nope, no, you can't. There are 2 ways that you can hire me post keynote in 2023 and beyond.
I
So
love, talk about the intentional experience design session.
yes,
This is
so my
so
signature
good.
keynote is called Creating Superfans. And I go through what I call the super model, which I talk about in my book. And super is a 5-part framework. It's an acronym, SUPER. Typically, when I'm giving a keynote, the first time I'm engaging with an organization, I'm going through that framework. I'm talking quickly about these 5 pillars that together encompass creating amazing customer and employee experiences so that you can turn your customers into superfans. So one of the 2 ways to work with me after an event is to hire me to go deeper on each of those pillars in either 5 or 6 follow-up virtual events. So it becomes an hour on S, an hour on U, etc. And I have a rate card for that. If you want to hire me, it's basically 5 virtual events that you're hiring me for. That is option number 1. Option number 2 is sort of taking the place of the consulting, which is what I call an intentional experience design day. So in an intentional experience design day, I am sitting with an executive team or a small number of leaders and a sales or marketing team, and really designing what they want their customer experience to be. We're getting very intentional on what your brand is, what those brand touch points are, and how you're making them matter more to those customers that you're trying to attract and retain. And so it's one day. Actually, the way the entire experience works is there's like a event call that I do that's a strategy call with the core team. It usually lasts about 90 minutes. That's me asking them questions and me giving them homework. So I'll say, here are all the things that you need to have together. Some of that are things that I review before the call. So things like, what are some of the customer touch points look like? What does your team look like right now? How are you compensating people? What are the metrics that you're tracking? So I know all of that going in, because in a consulting engagement, a lot of the early days is just that discovery period, right? And so one of the non-negotiables is I say, these are the things, like, you're going to pay me for this experience design day. We're not going to do it until you get me these things. So like, this is your homework. This is what you have to do. So when we get in that room together, either physically or virtually, like, everybody has done their homework. Everybody's on the same page. We all know what the expectations are. We spend up to 8 hours just going deep on all of the things that need attention, all of the things that we can fix. During that day, I'm taking notes on next steps across all 5 of those pillars of the framework and everything they need to do. We touch on things like branding. We touch on things like revenue operations. We touch on things like what the service and support needs to look like, onboarding employees, like all of the things, because again, all of it is part of experience. So at the end of that day, usually like 2 or 3 days later, they get basically a debrief from me that's like, here's everything we talked about. Here are all of the next steps for you. And here is who you told me on your team would be accountable for those things. So they get this recap from me that's like, here are my next steps. About 2 weeks after that, when they've like had a chance to implement some of those things, we do a recap call. It's usually about an
Nice.
hour. That's for them to update me on the things that are happening and to ask for any support that they need on next steps. And then 1 month after that, we do another call that sort of like closes it out. And that
Mhm.
is such a great model for me, because instead of it just like dragging on and on and on, it's like, you're going to do your homework. I'm going to talk to you for an hour and a half. I'm going to do some stuff. We're going to spend one day like in the weeds, deep diving, doing this. Like it's an actual execution day. And then I'm going to be here to support you in 2 calls after. And I charge for that, like double what I would charge for my keynote. So
Good.
because they're getting essentially me 4 times, it's like a pre-call and 2 post calls.
Really good. Oh my gosh. I love that idea. And I want everybody to recognize how intentional you have been about how you want to spend your time. For those of you who have done coaching and didn't like it, take it off your menu. For those of you who did consulting and didn't like it, maybe this is an option for you that you can suggest. And I love that you have 2 options after, and that is it.
Yes, my
I
third
think,
option is I know a guy, and then
yeah,
it's me referring them to someone else. But the answer to door number 3 is always no, because for me, it's not about time, or I mean, excuse me, for me, it's not about money. It's about time. It's about no, like if I'm going to go speak 45 times or 50 times a year in person plus virtual stuff, like there is nothing that I could consult on that is more important than the fact that like I want to be at my kids' acting practice every Wednesday afternoon.
so good. Well, Brittany, I, as usual, am blown away by you. I think the people listening in are going to have probably some questions for you. Talk about how, oh, okay, so first of all, we want to make sure that they do not forget to run, don't walk, to get your copy of Creating Superfans by Brittany Hodak. It is going to be an amazing read. It's going to be a book you're going to go back to again and again. Where should they go and buy it? What's the best place that they could go from your perspective?
Well, thank you. The best place is wherever you love to buy books. So it's
Okay.
available everywhere. If you want to order it on Amazon, that would be great. If you want to order it from your favorite local bookshop or walk into a bookstore in your town, there's no wrong way to buy this book. I will say I am biased, but the hardcover version is my favorite. You can also get it as an audiobook or an ebook, but the hardcover is beautiful and brilliant. And because Jane, like you have been such an amazing resource to me. You've been so helpful to me in my career, and I want to be helpful to your podcast listeners. Anybody who buys the book and is a speaker, just send me an email. I'm Brittany at BrittanyHodak.com. I'm going to be putting together a debrief like a few weeks after the book comes out of basically everything I did that worked, everything I did that didn't work, some of the crazy things I did. I dressed up as my book for Halloween. Like I legit made a huge like poster board looking version of my book with a QR code on the back that said like, this book is scary good, you should order it, and like walked all around Halloween festivals downtown. We have a ridiculous Christmas lights display where the HOA lights champions like 5 years in a row. There's a big ass sign in the yard that says, if you like the lights, you'll love this book, with a QR code. Like, so all of those things. So if you're a speaker and you're thinking about launching your book or your next book, buy the book because it's great and it will help me. And then send me an email and I'll make sure that you get on the distribution list for my like postmortem that I'm going to be doing probably like towards the beginning of February.
Hey, you all need to take advantage of that. I want that because well, I probably will have my book out by then, but I think it'll be great for my clients who are going to be authors in the future. Brittany Hodak, thank you so much for your time today. I know that everybody will have taken a page or 2 of notes like I did. Appreciate your time so much.
Thank you, Jane.
And for those listening in, we will see you soon, wealthy speakers. Bye for now.